Hello and welcome to today's lecture. The topic for today's lecture is the biopsychosocial model and its assumptions. The main objectives of today's lecture are understanding the historical background of the biopsychosocial model, to understand mind-body perspective on health and illness, understanding the role of biological, social, and psychological factors in health and illness, and to get familiar with the major premises of the biopsychosocial model. Let's start with a historical background of the biopsychosocial model. 19th century saw the emergence of modern medicine. Man, the 19th century term, was studied using dissection, physical investigations, and medical examinations. Darwin's thesis, The Origin of Species, published in 1856, described the theory of evolution by natural selection. This revolutionary theory identified a place for man within nature and suggested that we were part of nature and that we developed from nature and that we were biological beings continuous with other species. The earliest systematically written evidence on the knowledge about the relation between soul and body, between the physiological or organic and the psychological, can be found in the period from the year 500 to 300 BC in the writings of ancient Greek philosophers. Historically, philosophers have vacillated between the view that the mind and the body are part of the same system and the idea that they are two separate systems. When we look at ancient history, it becomes clear that we have come full circle in our beliefs about the mind-body relationship. During human prehistory, most cultures regarded the mind and the body as intertwined. Disease was thought to arise when evil spirits entered the body, and treatment consisted primarily of attempts to exorcise these spirits. Some skulls from the Stone Age have small symmetrical holes that are believed to have been made intentionally with sharp tools to allow the evil spirits to leave the body while the shaman performed the treatment ritual. The ancient Greeks were among the earliest civilizations to identify the role of bodily factors in health and illness. Rather than ascribing illness to evil spirits, they developed a humoral theory of illness. According to their viewpoint, the disease resulted when the four humors, or circulating fluids, of the body, blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm, were out of balance. The goal of treatment was to restore balance among the humors. The Greeks did assign a role for the mind, however. They described personality types associated with each of the four humors, with blood being associated with a passionate temperament, black bile with sadness, yellow bile with an angry disposition, and phlegm with a laid-back approach to life. The Greeks then attributed disease to bodily factors but believed that psychological factors could also have an effect. By the Middle Ages, however, the pendulum had swung back towards supernatural explanations for disease. Disease was regarded as God's punishment for evil-doing, and cure often consisted of driving out the evil forces by torturing the body. Later, this form of therapy was replaced by penance through prayer and good works. During this time, the church was the guardian of the medical knowledge, and as a result, medical practice assumed religious overtones. The functions of the physician were typically absorbed by priests, so healing and practice of religion became virtually indistinguishable. Beginning in the Renaissance and continuing into the present day, great strides have been made in understanding the technical basis of medicine. These advances include the invention of the microscope in the 1600s and the development of the science of autopsy, which allowed medical practitioners to see the organs that were implicated in different diseases. As the science of cellular pathology progressed, the humoral theory of illness was finally put to rest. As a result of scientific advances such as these, medical practice drew increasingly on laboratory findings and looked to bodily factors rather than the mind as basis of health and illness. In an effort to break with the superstitions of the past, practitioners resisted acknowledging any role of the mind in disease processes. Instead, they focused primarily on organic and cellular pathology as a basis for their diagnosis and treatment recommendations. Now we are going to discuss the psychoanalytic contributions. This view began to change with the rise of modern psychology, particularly with Sigmund Freud's early work on convergent hysteria. According to Freud, specific unconscious conflicts can produce particular physical disturbances that symbolize repressed psychological conflicts. In convergent hysteria, the patient converts the conflict into a symptom where the voluntary nervous system, he or she then becomes relatively free of anxiety the conflict would otherwise produce. Problems including sudden loss of speech, hearing or sight, tremors, muscular paralysis, and eating disorders such as anorexia nervosa and bulimia have also been interpreted as forms of convergent hysteria. True convergent responses, however, are now rarely seen. Now we are going to talk about the field of psychosomatic medicine. The idea that specific illnesses are produced by individuals' internal conflicts was perpetuated in the work of Flanders Dunbar in 1930s and Franz Alexander in 1940s. Unlike Freud, these researchers linked patterns of personality rather than a single specific conflict to specific illnesses. For example, Alexander developed a profile of ulcer-prone personality as someone whose disorder is caused primarily by excessive needs of dependency and love. A more important departure from Freud concerned the physiological mechanisms postulated to account for the link between conflict and the disorder. Whereas Freud believed that convergent reactions occur without any necessary physiological change, Dunbar and Alexander maintained that conflicts produce anxiety, which becomes unconscious and takes a physiological toll on the body via the autonomic nervous system. The continuous physiological changes eventually produce an actual organic disturbance. In case of the ulcer patient, for example, repressed emotions resulting from frustrated dependency and love-seeking needs were said to increase the secretion of certain acids in the stomach, eventually eroding the stomach lining and producing ulcers. Dunbar's and Alexander's work helped shape the emerging field of psychosomatic medicine by offering profiles of particular disorders believed to be psychosomatic in origin, that is, caused by emotional conflicts. The psychosomatic movement cordoned off a particular set of diseases as caused by psychological factors, namely ulcers, hyperthyroidism, rheumatoid arthritis, essential hypertension, neurodermatitis, colitis, and bronchial asthma. As such, the range of medical problems to which psychological and social factors were deemed to apply was restricted. We now know that all illnesses raise psychological issues. Moreover, researchers now believe that a particular conflict or personality type is not sufficient to produce an illness. Rather, the onset of disease requires the interaction of a variety of factors. These include a possible genetic weakness in the organism, the presence of environmental stressors, early learning experiences and conflicts, current and ongoing learning and conflicts, and individual cognitions and coping efforts. Despite criticisms of the early psychosomatic movement, it laid the groundwork for a profound change in beliefs about the relation of mind and body. The mind and the body cannot be meaningfully separated in matters of health and illness. Now we shall discuss the current mind-body perspective. The renewed interest in the mind-body relationship has also been fueled by several new developments. One is the increasing attention in Western medicine to traditional East Asian medical philosophies and practices. For example, the Chinese approach to health and illness focuses on the whole person and, rather than regarding a diseased organ in isolation, considers its relations to all the body's systems. By identifying symptoms and using other diagnostic technologies, the pattern of disharmony that has resulted in illness is identified. The goal of treatment is to restore balance, which is often accomplished through treatments such as herbal remedies, acupuncture, massage, exercise, and nutrition. These insights have been increasingly incorporated into Western medical care. The field of neuroscience has developed powerful new tools that permit glimpses into the brain as well as burgeoning knowledge of the autonomic neuroendocrine and immune systems. These developments have made it possible to connect psychosocial conditions such as social support and positive beliefs to underlying biology in ways that make believers out of skeptics. Neuroscience holds several of the keys to understanding the mechanisms that link psychosocial phenomena to illness outcomes. The knowledge and methods of neuroscience also shed light on such questions as how do placebos work? Why are many people felled by functional disorders that seem to have no underlying biological causes? Why is chronic pain so intractable to treatment? These and other applications of neuroscience will help to address clinical puzzles that have mystified practitioners for decades. Illness, the experienced condition of being unhealthy either in body or in mind, has typically relied in Western medicine on naturalistic explanatory models shaped and constrained by the social culture. The Western social culture developed a reductionist approach starting with the scientific revolution in the 16th and 17th centuries. At the same time, and as part of the scientific revolution, the idea that mind and body were separate phenomena evolved, and this idea is still influencing healthcare. The biomedical model is characterized by a reductionist approach that attributes illness to a single cause located within the body and that considers disturbances of mental processes as a separate and unrelated set of problems. The biomedical model, which governed the thinking of most health practitioners for past 300 years, maintains that all illness can be explained on the basis of aberrant somatic bodily processes such as biochemical imbalances or neurophysiological abnormalities. The biomedical model assumes that psychological and social processes are largely irrelevant to the disease process. Although the biomedical model has undeniable benefits for studying some diseases, it has several potential liabilities as well. First, it is a reductionist single-factor model. That is, it reduces illness to low-level processes such as disordered cells and chemical imbalances rather than recognizing the importance of more general social and psychological processes. Second, the biomedical model implicitly assumes a mind-body dualism, namely that mind and body are separate entities. Third, the biomedical model clearly emphasizes illness over health. That is, it focuses on aberrations that lead to illness rather than on conditions that might promote health. And finally, the biomedical model fails to address common puzzles regarding health and illness. Why, for example, if 6 people are exposed to measles, do only 3 develop the disease? This model can be better understood in terms of a few questions and their answers. The first question is, what causes illness? According to the biomedical model of medicine, diseases either come from outside the body, invade the body and cause physical change within the body, or originate as internal involuntary physical changes. Such disease may be caused by several factors such as chemical imbalances, bacteria, viruses, and genetic predisposition. The second question is, who is responsible for illness? Because illness is seen as arising from biological changes beyond their control, individuals are not seen as responsible for their illness. They are regarded as victims of some external force causing internal change. The third question is, how should illness be treated? The biomedical model regards treatment in terms of vaccination, surgery, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy, all of which aims to change the physical state of the body. The fourth question that the biomedical model seeks to answer is, who is responsible for treatment? The responsibility for treatment rests with the medical profession. The fifth question is about the relationship between health and illness. Within the biomedical model, health and illness are seen as qualitatively different. You are either healthy or ill. There is no continuum between the two. The sixth question, what is the relationship between mind and body? According to the biomedical model of medicine, the mind and body function independently of each other. This is comparable to a dualistic model of mind-body split. From this perspective, the mind is incapable of influencing physical matter, and the mind and body are defined as separate entities. The mind is seen as abstract and relating to feelings and thoughts, and the body is seen in terms of physical matter such as skin, muscles, bones, brain, and organs. Changes in physical matter are regarded as independent of the changes in the state of mind. The seventh question is, what is the role of psychology in health and illness? Within the traditional biomedicine, illness may have psychological consequences but not psychological causes. For example, cancer may cause unhappiness, but mood is not seen as related to either the onset or progression of cancer. The biopsychosocial approach was developed at Rochester decades ago by Dr. George Engel and John Romano. The late George Engel believed that to understand and respond adequately to patients' suffering and to give them a sense of being understood, clinicians must attend simultaneously to the biological, psychological, and social dimensions of the illness. Engel criticized the biomedical model on the following grounds. First, a biochemical alteration does not translate directly into an illness. The appearance of illness results from the interaction of diverse causal factors, including those at the molecular, individual, and social levels. And the converse. Psychological alterations may, under certain circumstances, manifest as illnesses or forms of suffering that constitute health problems, including, at times, biochemical correlates. 2. The presence of a biological derangement does not shed light on the meaning of the symptoms to the patient, nor does it necessarily infer the attitudes and skills that the clinician must have to gather information and process it well. 3. Psychosocial variables are more important determinants of susceptibility, severity, and course of illness than had been previously appreciated by those who maintain the biomedical view of illness. 4. Adopting a sick role is not necessarily associated with the presence of a biological derangement. 5. The success of the most biological of treatments is influenced by psychosocial factors, for example, the so-called placebo effect. 6. The patient-clinician relationship influences medical outcomes, even if only because of its influences on adherence of a chosen treatment. 7. Unlike inanimate subjects of scientific scrutiny, patients are profoundly influenced by the way in which they are studied, and the scientists engaged in the study are influenced by their subjects. The idea that mind and body together determine health and illness logically implies a model for studying these issues called the biopsychosocial model. Its fundamental assumption is that health and illness are consequences of the interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. Engel offered a holistic alternative to the prevailing biomedical model that had dominated industrialized societies for centuries. He formulated his model at a time when science itself was evolving from an exclusively analytic, reductionist, and specialized endeavor to become more contextualized and cross-disciplinary. Angel did not deny that mainstream of biomedical research had fostered important advances in medicine, but he criticized its excessively narrow biomedical focus for leading clinicians to regard patients as objects and for ignoring the possibility that the subjective experience of the patient was amenable to scientific study. Angel championed his ideas not only as a scientific proposal but also as a fundamental ideology that tried to reverse the dehumanization of medicine and disempowerment of patients. His model struck a resonant chord with those sectors of medical profession that wished to bring more empathy and compassion into medical practice. As Angel wrote, the biomedical model not only requires that disease be dealt with as an entity independent of social behavior, it also requires that behavioral aberrations be explained on the basis of disordered somatic, biochemical, or neurophysiological processes. Although Angel did not deny that this reductionist approach had resulted in great advances in the diagnosis and treatment of some life-threatening and debilitating diseases, he and others were aware that the model was incomplete in not being able, even in the 19th century, to account for well-recognized illnesses such as the hysteria and neurasthenia, where there was no evidence of disease. The biopsychosocial model of health and illness states that interactions between biological, psychological, and social factors determine the cause, manifestation, and outcomes of wellness and disease. Historically, popular theories like nature versus nurture debate posited that any one of these factors was sufficient to change the course of development. The biopsychosocial model argues that any one factor is not sufficient. It is the interplay between people's genetic makeup, biology, mental health and behavior, psychology, and sociocultural factors, social world, that determine the course of their health-related outcomes. Now we are going to discuss the biological influences on health. Biological influences on health and illness include genetics, infections, physical trauma, nutrition, hormones, and toxins. Many disorders have an inherited genetic vulnerability. In schizophrenia, for example, if one monozygotic twin develops schizophrenia, there is at least a 60% chance that the co-twin will also develop that disorder. Considering that the prevalence of schizophrenia in the population is only 1%, it is clear that genetic factors play an important role in the development of this disorder. At the same time, 40% of co-twins do not develop schizophrenia, suggesting that genes do not account for all the inheritance. Instead, certain non-biological, that is environmental, factors play a role in expression of disorder in those with a pre-existing genetic risk. Now we will discuss the psychological influences on health. Psychological component of biopsychosocial model includes potential psychological factors that may contribute to development of a health problem. These include lack of self-control, emotional turmoil, and negative thinking. Individuals with a genetic vulnerability may be more likely to display negative thinking that puts them at risk for depression. Alternatively, psychological factors may exacerbate a biological predisposition by putting a genetically vulnerable person at risk for other risk behaviors. For example, depression on its own may not cause liver problems, but a person with depression may be more likely to abuse alcohol and therefore develop liver damage. Now we shall talk about the social influences on health. Social factors include socioeconomic status, culture, technology, and religion. For instance, losing one's job or ending of a romantic relationship may place one at risk for stress and illness. Such life events may predispose an individual to developing depression, which may in turn contribute to physical health problems. The impact of social factors is widely recognized in mental disorders like anorexia nervosa, which is a disorder characterized by excessive and purposeful weight loss despite evidence of low body weight. The fashion industry and the media promote an unhealthy standard of beauty that emphasizes thinness over health. This exerts social pressure to attain this ideal body image despite the obvious health risks. Now we shall talk about the cultural factors implicated in health and illness. Also included in the social domain are cultural factors. For instance, differences in the circumstances, expectations, and belief systems of different cultural groups contribute to different prevalence rates and symptom expression of disorders. For example, anorexia is less common in non-Western cultures because they put less emphasis on thinness in women. Cultural factors can even differ across a single city from low-income to high-income areas, and rates of disease and illness differ across these communities accordingly. Culture can even change biology, as research on epigenetics is beginning to show. Specifically, research in epigenetics suggests that the environment can actually alter an individual's genetic makeup. For instance, research shows that individuals exposed to overcrowding and poverty are more at risk for developing depression, with actual genetic mutations forming over a single generation. Now we shall take a look at the assumptions of the biopsychosocial model. A biopsychosocial view of illness begins with the basic assumption that health and illness result from interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. The biopsychosocial approach seeks to understand psychopathology by examining the interactive influences of biology, cognitive processes, and learning. Biopsychosocial mode of health focuses on the well-being of the organism rather than just absence of disease or pathology in the body. It also focuses on optimal health and wellness. This model holds that mind and body mutually influence each other. Human organism influences and is influenced by its environment, both social and physical. Human behavior, feelings, transactions, and relationships can be specifically investigated. This model explains why some individuals experience phenomena as illness and others as problems of living. This model takes person-in-environment perspective on health and illness. The idea that mental states are influenced by many interacting processes such as bodily processes, personality, dispositions, and life events is a very old one. It was well articulated by early Greek physicians over 2000 years ago and has existed in many cultures, old and new. Early forerunners of the modern biopsychosocial approach can be found in Mayer's psychobiology approach, behavioral medicine, and the psychosomatic medicine. The biopsychosocial approach, however, is most clearly identified with the cardiologist Engel, who in 1960s used it to understand heart disease. Engel pointed out that heart disease was often the endpoint of a very large variety of cultural, social, and psychological factors impinging on the cardiovascular system. These include factors such as genetic vulnerabilities, poverty and diet, smoking and exercise, and coping with stress factors. Since then, many psychologists have contributed to this approach, and Kessler offers an excellent overview of the history of biopsychosocial approach and its current application to mental health. In its application to mental disorders, the biopsychosocial approach is critical of the narrow focus of biomedical approaches. For clinical psychology to become a genuinely integrative profession capable of utilizing scientific findings from a multitude of areas, it is vital we do not confuse biopsychosocial approach with psychiatry's use of biomedical model. The biopsychosocial approach is ideally suited to cope with the increasing complexities of the clinical sciences because its focus is on interactions in various domains. With that, we come to the end of today's lecture. I hope you have enjoyed it well. Thank you very much.